Welcome to CS Radio. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 224 of CS Radio. I'm J. Michael DeAngelis.
And I'm N. Thomas Leach.
Oh my goodness, using the full monk here.
Sometimes just strikes me.
I love it. Natty, you and I were just chatting about what today's episode was going to be about, and it seems like you're
we always do 10 seconds before we start
it
rolling.
It seems like you're already in a summer state of mind.
Well, of course, summer's on its way. You know, I had this moment over the weekend where I was talking to someone, and they were like, "Oh yeah, I'm going back to campus." I was like, "Why? Summer's so much longer than this." I was like, "Wait, we're only in March."
Yeah, man.
I had a moment.
Wishful thinking?
Yeah, maybe.
But it's a time here in March, moving into April, that our students are really focused on what they're doing this summer. A lot of people have something lined up. Just as many folks might still be on the search, and a lot of people are thinking about what's going to be happening right after graduation. And again, some folks are all lined up. They've got their first job lined up, or they know that they're going to be going to grad school, and some people are still figuring it out, and some people are like, I know what I'm doing, but maybe it doesn't start till the late fall, or maybe it doesn't even start till 2026.
Yeah, some people
So
are ready
how do
to
I
chill.
fill that time? So let's talk a little bit about all the different ways that folks can spend their summer, and you made the suggestion maybe we'll even reflect on how we spent some of our or misspent our youthful summer.
Yeah, we should talk about our summers. I feel like our summers it was a different time.
It was, I think I'm sure that I've talked about at least some of my summer experiences on the show before, but I don't know that I've got a strong sense of what you did each summer when you were at NYU. Did you stay up in New York each summer?
Well, so one of the things I was going to point out is that, I mean, when I started working here at Penn, the vibe on summer internships felt very different from what I was used to, just because at NYU, you're in New York during the fall and the spring. You're at the hub of everything, seemingly, maybe to some extent true, some extent not. But there's so much going on that you can do professionally that it was so much more likely for NYU students to do something in the fall or spring semesters, and then summer could be totally open. So most of my friends, myself included, would do summer camp or something else over the summer, chill, travel, whatever it might be. I had a part-time job. I worked at an ice cream stand for a little while to earn some extra cash.
I have heard that.
So it was very different for my summers. I mean, later on, I got the pressure of I feel like I should just keep doing something to have some more professional stuff to get ready for, and I basically just extended my fall spring internship that I had with the Trans-Siberian Orchestra to go into the summer as well. So I did that from like a music business perspective. But yeah, so many of my friends were basically just doing stuff in the fall and the spring because there was so much going on.
Well, I think that does. I think it's got a lot to do with the campus atmosphere, because at Penn, the way the academics are structured, it does not allow a lot of time to have an internship. Even though we're in a city, there's a lot of businesses, major corporations that might be attractive. It's tricky, although more people do it now, certainly, than when I started.
I was say, Wharton students barely have class on Fridays.
Well, but I think, however, right, the other part is you got your academics, and then you have all of your Penn extracurriculars, your student clubs, and all of that really, it takes a lot of time, and people take those things, rightfully so, very seriously, and make a lot of commitment. And we've talked on the show before about how being in a student club, having an extracurricular, is a real professional development opportunity in its own right. So really focusing on that during the school year, and maybe having a leadership role in your club, that can be just as valuable as having a formal
and there's so many ways you can fill your time, and how you spread it out is kind of up to you, as long as you're accomplishing a few things that'll help set you up for either gaining new skills, making connections, exploring a new industry. I think if you're having opportunities to do those things, it could be the fall, the spring, the summer, whenever it might be. I think when I first started here and I was on the College of Arts and Sciences team, at one point in a meeting I mentioned why don't more students look at fall or spring? And there's an audible gasp.
Oh, with amongst the college advising.
Yeah. I got daggers from 30 people.
Yeah.
And to some extent, I get it. Classes are extremely important. It takes up a lot of time. But I think a lot of employers also know if you're doing an internship in the fall and the spring, they know that you are also a student during that time.
Right.
Some of that, though, does put undue pressure, I think, on students to have to articulate that to an employer, where sometimes they might feel like I'm just going to say yes to anything they say. So I think there is some, we've talked about this in the podcast before, but some idea of like level setting and setting priorities of the balance that you need in a work environment, especially when you're also a student, if you do choose to take on a fall or spring internship. And that can be a challenge.
It's so important. Our student producer Lorna, who is in Washington for this
DC.
semester, she has been open. She's talked about it on the show that her freshman year, I guess, she did an internship during the school year, and it just it got to be too much. I think the internship asked a lot of her. I think they really liked her, and so they were giving her more and more responsibility, and then trying to balance that with her class load and being a very active student on campus, it just kind of it all came crashing down.
Yeah, and it never came crashing down on me, but I think that when I was an undergrad, I took on more than I probably should have.
Well, you worked, I know you worked at the NYU gym.
Yeah, there was a semester where I had a full course load. I was working at the gym in the mornings. I was interning with the Trans-Siberian Orchestra in the late afternoons-ish, and then I would do some night classes. That's how it fit on my schedule. I had some classes that ended until 8 p.m. or something, and then I would get back to my dorm where I was an RA, and I would sometimes do programming there. And I didn't really think about it, but at one point the residence hall director was like, "Are you okay? You look like a zombie." I was like, "I'm fine. I'm just doing what I gotta do." And
then off to Brooklyn for late night.
You're
band
right.
shows.
I was also in a band, so yeah, we had rehearsals on Wednesdays. I would get back at 2 a.m. those days with a dollar slice in my hand.
These are the things that you can do when you're 19, 20, 21.
Yeah, I could not. I could do maybe one of those things a day now.
So I was at a non-urban campus, right? I was in Muhlenberg in the very suburban part of Allentown. Allentown has an urban part, but certainly not where the campus is. With not much around other than houses. So there were not a ton of opportunities. Some of my friends did do school year internships. There were some scientific labs and chemical companies that were within driving distance of the campus.
Isn't there a GSK? There's something out that way.
There is a pharma. I don't remember which one it is.
Yeah,
there is a pharmaceutical companies out there. There was a Dow plant out there at the time. And there's actually a small media empire out there because I don't remember the name of the production company, but the folks that would produce forensics files.
Oh.
They
Poconos Television.
They were based out of Allentown, and so a lot of times I had many friends that were victims or murderers on forensics files. And then one of my really good friends did intern with them on the production side of things, doing camera work and stuff. So the opportunities existed, but it was the exception, not the rule. But as a theater student, I had a really amazing opportunity in the summer in that Muhlenberg used to host a professional summer theater, a regional summer theater, where we would put on 2 to 3 shows plus a children's show, plus there was a summer educational summer camp that was really great. And so it was the opportunity to act, usually in a small part or be in the chorus, sometimes got a larger role, alongside professional working actors who auditioned to do these shows in New York because it was a regional contract. And then the 2 of the years, really 3, it was one of those experiences where I was being sort of shadow trained for something without realizing it. But I was officially the company manager my junior and senior year, which was a real internship. I was a real here's how to do contracts, here's running an office, and here's all those sorts of things that I learned so much about how theater actually operates.
You were the understudy for the theater as a whole.
Sort of. And in fact, my senior year, the man I reported to, I guess he was the company manager and I was the assistant company manager, had a family emergency, and he was gone for the last 2 weeks of the summer, and I just had to go to the office every day and be in charge and make sure payroll got done and things like that.
Did your theater have a ghost?
Oscar.
Oscar.
Yeah.
It was a named
Oscar
entity.
Bernheim.
Okay.
Yes, they tore down his house to build the theater, so of course he haunts the theater.
Did you keep a light on for him or whatever? What is that all
A
about?
ghost light.
Yes.
Yes, of course.
Okay. These are the things I think about.
So I had a really great, like, the fact that was built into sort of my course of study. It was, you didn't have to do it, but a lot of us did, and it was such a great pre-professional way to spend my summers. Though I would say the one disadvantage it put me at is that then when it was time to graduate, I hadn't been on the job search at all because I had a job lined up every summer without having to really think about it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So even though I wanted at first to be an actor, I was like, okay, I'm going to go out and just act, be a starving actor.
Here I am.
You still got to pay the bills,
Yeah.
right? So I had to get a job somehow.
Here.
Yeah, I had I mean,
The
in
movie
New York.
theater.
Yeah, so I ended up working at a movie theater, which was a job I got through networking. But I would have been really at sea had I not. So again, it was someone I networked with through that summer theater program. One of the women in the show, her husband ran a movie theater outside of New York City, and we got to know him. And he said, "Oh, you're moving to Jersey City? The movie theater is like 10 minutes away. Why don't you come work at the movie theater? Why don't we talk about what that would look like?" And so that's how that happened. So it was very lucky for me, but
You saw a lot of that. I mean, you talked on the podcast before about like seeing the essential corporate takeover of the
that was a whole
movie theater. Like you ended up gaining a lot of good experiences through that job.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I learned a lot about what I didn't want to do and what kind of company I didn't want to work for, which is, by then I was, that was my full-time job. I learned how hard it is to try and balance like having an artistic life with that's the thing about working in a movie theater or a retail job. It's not really 9 to 5. Those places are open first thing in the morning to last thing at night, and sometimes you got to work.
Sometimes they're fast paced. Like when I was at the ice cream stand, like they started me out once at like a night shift sort of. It was like the 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. hour, and they're like, all right, we got to move this kid to the morning because it's too crazy. Because you've seen the ice cream stand that I used to work at in Roxborough, and it gets like it's on Ridge Ave. It gets like a line out the door
on a nice summer night.
No
that's
door,
like everybody's.
Yeah,
it's probably
sometimes
there's a
it
line
blocks
until
Ridge
it closes.
Avenue.
Yeah.
So it is a fast-paced environment in a way that if you haven't had a job like that before, that you don't totally understand, I think, until you experience it yourself.
Yeah, it's the same thing working at a busy movie theater on a Saturday night. You're like, oh, my God, when does it stop? It stops when the last movie's done playing, right? It's really – so, yeah, having that kind of experience. And then, yes, it was an independently owned theater chain that got bought by a big corporation, and then having to adjust to a real corporate mindset of like you consult the binder. There's like if there's a question, look in the binder.
The binder
what
knows
if,
all.
yeah,
the binder's your god.
But what if it's not? What if the answer isn't in the binder? Then there is no answer. Like really, it was just very rigid, right? And their ideas about customer service were very rigid, and it was was like I didn't feel good to me, so I ended up leaving that. But so again, even though that was my first job post graduation, I think it served a similar function as an internship might have. Had I gone to work in a corporate office one summer instead of working at Muhlenberg, I might have learned that even earlier. Like, that's not an environment that I'm going to thrive in because I would rather think creatively about an answer than just consult a binder.
Yeah. And I think for our students at Penn, everything seems so fast. So I think a lot of times students feel like I need to have like the perfect huge professional internship right away. So sometimes like hearing about like, working at a retail job or working for a part-time just to earn some money feels like it's going to be a waste of time.
A waste of time. I mean, Carson, who does a lot of our social media content, was over last week, and he was like, I just figured out my next 2 summers, and he's a sophomore.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't even know what I'm doing this weekend, dude.
Well, I mean, part of the point of it being so early, I mean, it does put extra stress on people to obviously get plans in order, but it almost removes the stress of having professional things before you get those internships because you won't have done them before you find an internship. I mean, I was talking to first-year students who are applying to a couple things that are for sophomore summer, so not this summer but next summer, But really, what is there to talk about? You haven't had your first summer after college. All you can really go off of is your own life experiences, your things from high school and accomplishment there, what you've done at Penn so far in less than a full academic year. But so there's almost like less of the need for something super big and professional because they review so much earlier.
It's interesting. What do you tell freshmen, first year students who are applying to things for next summer? Like, and again, that's a really difficult concept for me even after all these years. But what do you tell folks to focus on?
Was it Carson that said it? I was having a conversation with someone. I think it was Carson the other day, and he was like, "Yeah, the interviews are just so much more just vibe based."
He did
now.
say
He's
that.
like,
Yeah,
it's all
vibes.
Which I think is somewhat true. And even with going along with that, one of the biggest things we focus on as career advisors for helping people with mock interviews is how do you still maintain your humanity and come across as an interesting person to be around. So I think a lot of the interview takes less pressure off of you being able to say, I've done X super impressive thing, but instead being able to reflect upon your own experience and why something that you did that maybe isn't as impressive on paper was impressive or was really helpful for things that you are interested in doing in the future. So some of it is connecting, finding those shared connections with whoever you're talking to, whether that's the type of work that they do or the type of projects that are important to them, and then fitting in the projects that you've worked in that are similar to that, even if it's not exactly that. So those transferable either skills or settings that might fit into something new, I think is really important from that standpoint. Doing extra research on what the company does helps a lot more to be able to identify those things. So you're not just going in with, I did this in high school, I did that in high school, and I'm doing this now, but also being able to understand like, oh, these types of deals are really important to this client, to the clients of this company. So I should really think about how the things I've done in the past fit into that industry or that setting, or how I might be more effective working with a client because I've had a retail job where it was really fast paced and I had to make sure I was meeting customer demands really quickly. Things like that can be super helpful.
I think that's such smart advice because, as you said, there's like, you're going to have less professional knowledge, less educational knowledge. So just being able to go in and speak intelligently about what you know they do, why you're interested in what they do, why you would be interested in working there a year and a half from now.
Yep. Knowing yourself is really important, which is hard because I think a lot of times students rightfully don't know what they want to do, which is still okay. You don't need to know that.
I mean, to me, one of the things that this accelerated recruiting thing has done is, I think it's put a dampen on that exploration part because you feel like you lose the safety of, I'm just going to try this for the summer and maybe I'll love it, but maybe I'll find out this is not what I want to do at all, and that'll be okay.
Well, in some ways, I think it's almost it's come back around on itself where now there is more time to explore, because if you already have something lined up a summer away, like a year and a half from now, that means that this upcoming summer you can do whatever you want and really be flexible.
Well, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
But I think it locks students in a lot more where they have something that's a few years out, then they're already on that path before they've had the chance to explore. So they're making decisions before they've had the chance to explore and see things.
This is a great segue into another topic that's come up a lot and is related, which is, what if I really regret that decision I made a year ago and I want to go in a different direction and now I need to renege on an offer?
Yeah, we had last week, 3 meetings in a row about that, I think.
It's been coming up a lot. It's been coming up a lot.
We had a smaller undergrad team meeting about it. It's come up a lot.
I mentioned last week that a student really talked in depth to me while we were tabling at the bookstore about a tough decision she had to make. So it's just like it's in the air.
Yeah, and our biggest goal as career advisors is we want to be educational and talk through, this is how you can think about this situation. This is how you can hopefully help yourself find time to make a more informed decision before you get to the point where you feel like you need to go back on an offer and renege on that. So trying to take the educational approach is our biggest goal. It's very different from when I started here. There was one answer to should I renege, and the answer was no. No. Like, always honor your commitment that you made. And I think things are just much more flexible now because things are so early. It puts people in tough decisions. Employers,
the situation is different than it was 10 years ago.
Very different. And employers also knowingly are building that in a little bit to their practices. We get far less of the complaints, even though I know we get more reneges now. We get far less of complaints from employers. That being said, employers do still complain. I always tell students, like, if you're thinking about reneging, just know you're not going to be making friends when you go back on something. You are going to make
even
their
in
life
a best
harder.
case scenario where they're like, yeah, all right, we completely understand. That may be closing that door.
Yes. So the biggest thing we talk about is, like, are you prepared to do that? Like, does that fit into your long-term goals better, knowing that, like, you're probably going to be burning a bridge at least temporarily or for the foreseeable future at this place?
I just tried and frame it as, do what you need to do what you think is best for you, and then accept the consequences of that.
Yeah, and I try to tell students too, like, don't try to game the system too much, because it can feel like, oh, it's easier if I just accept this role and I don't really want it, but then I'm just going to do all this recruiting, continue to apply to a bunch of places. I think that's where students get into trouble, because then, one, if that gets back to that employer, they all go to the same career fairs and networking
very different
events.
to accept something just to have it,
yeah,
than to accept something and then a year later be like, I took this different course of study, or I did something my first year summer that really changed my perspective, and I want to change fields, I want to change industries, I just want to try something different. It's going to be too similar. I think that's a really different story than, well, I just said yes to the first thing just so I knew I would have something, and then I kept on shopping. That's different.
Yeah, exactly. And each person's situation is different. Like, some people might have a family thing comes up with health of a family member, or just their living conditions of where they need to be for the summer. Maybe they need to be at home to take care of a loved one, or for whatever reason, that location becomes super important, and having something solidified in another city or state might not be feasible for that. It could be the exploration piece, realizing that this is not the field that I see myself in, and I'm confident that I'm looking for this instead. Obviously, like, we have partnerships with employers, so I think that the delicate part is that we don't necessarily want students to be shopping around looking at this, because we want everyone to be happy. We want our employers to continue to love to hire Penn students, feel confident when they're getting a Penn student that they're going to do a great job. That's still the case, but we still are open to having the conversation with you, like, what's best for you? Do you understand what the repercussions might be if you do back out of an offer, in terms of the reputational harm of, burning a bridge there? Especially, I think it's hard when you're like a second year, like a sophomore or a junior, where you're still searching for stuff every year. Like, there's not enough time to stop and have, like, a gap. I think a lot of times once you're looking at a full-time job, you're naturally insulated, because you're going into a job for hopefully, probably about 2 years or so at least. And then moving to something else, you have that insulation. Whereas an internship, you're there for 3 months, and then you're looking for the next thing pretty quickly after.
Right. And holding out hope for that return offer.
Yeah, and sometimes you might want that return offer.
Yeah.
And if you don't get that return offer, then you might be going back to the people that you said that you didn't want to originally, and that's where things get awkward. So, I mean, our biggest thing is we want to have conversations with students to make sure they're making the best decision possible for them. And that includes, like, all those moving parts. The biggest thing we recommend to students is just understanding it's okay to ask for time before accepting something, especially when there are things that are pretty close back to each other. Even though things are early, there's a lot that goes on in similar windows. So it's always okay to ask an employer, thank you, really excited for the opportunity. Is it okay if I take an additional week or additional couple weeks to get back to you?
That's something we've been stressing more and more. We get a lot of students that ask us, could you do that for us? Well, that's not going to look great. There's no, I think they're hoping that there's some sort of formal process. And in the past, there was more of a formal process that we could ask employers to adhere to, but those days are long gone.
And we have our guidelines, but the truth is really, like, it's employers giving you more than 2 weeks is going to be generous for them. And if they're offering you less than 2 weeks, then you really should absolutely ask for more time, because that's probably a little bit unreasonable if they're saying, like, hey, you need to know today. Like, it's always okay to ask for more time. The worst case scenario from the employer side is that they say, no, we really need to know by, we told you Friday, we really need to know by Friday.
Right.
And then you have
but you need to have the confidence to ask, and you need to know that just asking is not going to hurt you, right? In the worst case, all they can say is, no, you need to tell us by Friday.
I've never had a student get an offer pulled because they asked for more time.
No, never, yeah.
And actually, there was one time they did. I don't know if I said this in the podcast before. There was one time they did, but it was because the student went in intentionally being really aggressive. And they said, listen, I really don't know if this is the position for me, and if I want it, if I'm going to make the decision, I need to have, this date until I get back to you by. And they said, okay, well, if you're going to be like that, then no. And then 2 hours later, the person's boss who he was talking to on the phone called them and said, "I'm so sorry that they said that you can have as much time as you need." so
wow,
the hardline approach worked. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that for everyone. I think it was a situation where for that student, he knew that was his last choice job of the things that he applied to, so he really wasn't interested in it. So he was more comfortable being more assertive with what he needed and wanted out of that offer, so it worked. But I don't know that it's always a good approach because, obviously then you rub things the wrong way.
Today he's the CEO of that company.
I have no idea. I don't even remember the person's name, so I couldn't even follow
up. Well, Natty, what are you doing this summer?
I don't know. What
are we doing? How many times are we going to go to the drive-in this summer?
Emily's going to Tahoe.
Oh.
I think I'm going to stay home with the dog.
Okay.
But I don't know. Nothing super exciting. We went to Puerto Rico last summer, so that was the fun trip then. Roswell the summer before that.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm a little tripped out.
You're tripped out. You two years in a row, you're good with it. Now you're good with vacation.
Yeah.
All right.
And what about you?
I don't know. I'm going to Hilton Head. I've never been there before. I'm going there with my family in June. That's the only thing that's set.
See, once you get to a certain point, you don't have to plan so far ahead. You can just kind of let things go. You can be like me and not even know. You can just travel and have fun. You don't have to be applying in all the pressure of things.
That's right.
Like
just,
it is now.
Just be like Natty. Just go with the flow.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what we won't be doing this summer. We won't be making a podcast because we go on hiatus for the summer.
That's true.
But maybe we will. We always do at least one live stream over the summer.
Yeah,
to try and get everybody back into school mode.
Yeah.
And maybe now that we've got the studio, maybe we'll do more than one this summer because it'll be a lot easier to set up. But there's plenty of more episodes to come. We're only in April, I suppose, as you listen to this. So we've got a whole month of episodes and change to come. So we've got at least one guest coming. We've got a new staff member that we want to introduce.
Yep.
So
we got an old staff member we want to reconnect with.
Yes, we have an old staff member that we want to check in with. So there's a lot of exciting things to come, a lot more topics to cover. And we'll see you next time on CS Radio. This podcast is produced by the University of Pennsylvania Career Services Office, a division of University Life. It was created by J. Michael DeAngelis and Amy Lynn Kirshner. Your hosts and producers are J. Michael DeAngelis and Natty Leach, and it's produced, mixed, and edited by Lorna Lynn. If you like this podcast, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Instagram and Threads at Penn Career Serve. We'll see you next time on CS Radio.